Revolutionary moments, the old guard used to say, happen when the rulers can't rule in the same old way and the people can't live in the same old way, and you just don't have any choice but to have it. And the other side never gives up, and they never surrender, and they don't ever quit fighting. And they will take back your victories if you don't watch out.
Some people would say it's fascism is around the corner. So there's some serious problems, real serious stuff.
Organizing is done in the street for starters. I think the protesters are to stir up thinking.
March 20th, 2005, the second anniversary of the Iraq War, my first protest. I'm a military veteran myself, although my life in the military actually started at birth in February 1969. I was an Army brat for 18 years, moving from country to country, shielded from all of that. September 17th, 2011. The Occupy Wall Street movement begins right inside New York City's Wall Street financial district. Seattle joins other cities in a growing national solidarity movement that is dubbed the Occupy movement.
You like American music? I like American.
This protest was different from what I'd been witnessing for the past 7 years. The demographics weren't polarized, and there were many young faces in the crowd.
Occupy was a big deal for a while. Or before that, here in Seattle, there was the WTO protest in late 1999, where people were out in the streets and corporate America was on the run.
The Republican convention, I think in 2000 or 2004, there was a real effort to isolate protesters. They put them like in holding pens a few blocks away and wouldn't let them march when they would protest. Then it seems like something broke loose when the Occupy movement got started, and everybody was really enthused. And we felt the energy all over the country, and it felt like protesters are really going to get their act together and get something done and change it. Really change things.
We are here to tell people that we're not just a bunch of idiots and that we have a say.
It warms my heart when I go in a march and I go in a protest and I see young people, because that's who's going to do it.
The Occupy movement was a wonderful thing because for the first time it started getting young people involved in society, or looking around and seeing what's right and wrong, what used to be done.
The Occupy movement was very heartening to see, because young people were becoming involved, became involved, and have stayed involved.
The only thing that really changes things is when you're in the streets, in a large number. That's what Washington listens to.
Well, I don't think there's any substitute for street protest. It's important to be persistent, and it's important to be focused.
Don't even tell me that there are little black blocs of violent revolution. Egypt did it without it. They were in a far worse situation than we are in now. Yeah.
Do not cross that line, otherwise you will basically be cursed.
The most pervasive issue raised by everyone with whom I spoke was how the media covers protests. There are glaring omissions from the television viewing audience, especially regarding how the police interact with protesters.
Okay, but you being nice to the police.
Antagonizing the police. I was pulling out a tear gas incident and they shot me with a rubber bullet to get me back. And I mean, it didn't hurt. It bounced off. I have padding. If anybody comes down here to Occupy, wear padding because it will help.
When the Occupy happened, Finally, in the mainstream media, a couple weeks into it, there was police brutality being caught here and there and there, and it began to get a lot of hits on the internet, and the media can't avoid that sort of thing because otherwise they become completely useless. So they began to talk about it, and the more the police brutality was talked about, the more people went out into the street. When you see an 83-year-old woman pepper sprayed in downtown Seattle, good job, guys. How does that make any sense to anybody?
Thank God for the medics here. That's all I can really say. All I know is that they're heroes, part of the protest group.
All of a sudden, like, it just got out of hand. Cops grabbing people, just spraying them in the face. I tried to get in the middle of it as a medic.
I was not sprayed directly, but holy shit. That shit will affect everybody in the radius.
I want to thank the police for all that mace, because it was pretty cold out here until you guys did that.
Can you go over to the other side and talk to the medic?
Pepper spray. That's pretty weak stuff.
No. Well,
can she come in?
They had water and Malbrox or some sort of like white liquid. What they say, literally within minutes, most of the burn is gone. I'm still shaking it. I'm still feeling it.
I'm always surprised when they cover the police brutality, you know?
Hopefully get some media coverage, and that becomes your voice. And what you have to say is amplified. These days it's amplified by the internet quite a bit more so, because the establishment media has always been somewhat problematic about covering this sort of thing.
How many people are watching?
467 right now.
Wow, there was more last night. Huh.
Yeah. You know what? Because they're all out here now.
Hey, good point.
Pretty much. Well, what I'd say is all major media is crap. It's intended to demoralize people.
The press in this country is not doing its job. And we don't hear the stories. We do not hear what the rest of the world hears. We're really kind of ignorant. There's no debate, there's no talk, there's no intellectual discussion at all. And so you have to go look for your news sources, usually some outside of the country.
The mainstream media was ridiculous. They want a sensationalist shot and then they're out of there. And they don't care what your message is.
While making this documentary, I talked to longtime protesters and protest groups, including members of the Raging Grannies and Veterans for Peace. I wondered what inspired them to protest.
I think the defining moment for me was when George W. Bush was elected, and I realized that I had to do something. So I started going to the protests and the marches and stuff, just simply to get my voice out there. We dress up in our funny costumes and sing, and people love it. Or we'll do what we call guerrilla gigs, and it takes 3, and we have an event that we know about, and we'll just go. Crash it. We've crashed City Hall, signed up, and then we just go up and sing, and they, well, the grannies are here.
Read our lips. Thank you very much.
Some of the women that have been involved from the beginning of the Seattle chapters have been activists for 50 years. One woman was on the committee to free the Rosenbergs. That's how far back she went.
My parents were very politically involved. So I remember going to civil rights demonstrations. I was in college in the Vietnam protest years. I've just always done that stuff.
I can't remember a specific incident, but I think it was starting to talk about invading Iraq, and the light bulb kind of went off at, boy, this sounds awfully familiar. It sounds so much like Vietnam. No good can come of this. So that's how I got involved in this organization.
The moment that got me in the streets was finally hearing an authority on the Iraq War, that all of the weapons of mass destruction were accounted for. And in spite of that, to every night see my president on the tube lying about it.
For me, everything started when I was in the Army. This was 1967. Vietnam War was running hard. I had been raised in a conservative family and had no reason to think that there was anything except do your duty and do it well. There was plenty of controversy about the war. I just hadn't been part of it. I had seen a demonstration, and I had been actually one of the assholes on the other side of the street throwing tomatoes at the demonstrators, before I'd ever joined the Army. And I can't even tell you why I did that. I'm embarrassed to even admit it. When my friends were all wearing peace signs, I was wearing a peace sign that had been modified into a swept-wing bomber, and it said "drop it" on it. I was a little right-wing asshole. I was working on a ward that had paraplegics on it. The fellows that can't move their arms, they can't even turn the page of a book. They can't wipe their own ass. They can't do anything. But they had complete control of their mental faculties. And so they're laying there, 18 years old. Their 17-year-old girlfriend comes in one time and never comes back. It's a bleak-ass situation. It made me decide I had to rethink things.
My moment in Vietnam wasn't really a moment to become activist, but it was a moment about what I thought about the war. That was during the Tet Offensive, when we saw a village next to us basically just blown away, including a lot of children, civilians mostly. When I got back to the United States, I went back to school, and I remember being a student at the University of Washington in 1971 when the United States invaded Cambodia, and I said, "You've got to be fucking kidding me." And that was when I actually got physically involved in the anti-war movement.
How many of these issues that people are protesting have actually ever been solved? Like, you had all these people anti-war. Where are they now?
I've caught myself wondering the same thing. The Occupy movement that had been so fierce during the fall of 2011 seemed to vaporize by the holiday season. It all seemed so overwhelming, and even disenchanting at times. Is protest even effective at all? Are there any words of encouragement to be offered?
There's an old political slogan that says, "Create public opinion, seize power." The political process is a lot tied up with creating public opinion. Well, how you do that, well, that's your business. But your task is to create public opinion. The second thing I've learned is that movements are like tides. They ebb and flow. Well, there are high tides of movement. You get those big moments like that, where people really flood in to participate. And inevitably, at some point, the tide goes down. And that's almost like a law of nature. And what happens oftentimes, of course, is that you get everybody in there, all movement activists and all gung-ho, and they're going to build a better tomorrow, whatever that is. And then, at a certain point, you realize that there's fewer and fewer over at the protest, and pretty soon you're just down to a handful of the hardcore. And everybody gets bummed out and goes home. That's understandable. That's built into the system. That's just the way it is. I mean, we don't get to actually choose whether that's good or bad. That's just the way it is. And it's important to understand that that's the way it is, because then you don't have to feel so bad when the tide goes down. Because it also means that the tide's going to come back up again.